Welcome to Keyboard Hitter. This is Keyboard Hitter AngularJS episode 3. Episode 3 is about Grunt AngularJS walkthrough. Today's agenda: what is Grunt and why Grunt? Grunt implementation walkthrough in our AngularJS application. Your support is all I need, so please hit the like button below. Please subscribe my channel for more upcoming latest episodes on AngularJS. So in our last two episodes, we have seen how to create a scaffolding of an AngularJS application using Yeoman, Grunt and Bower. So and we did some hands-on onto that application using AngularJS framework. So in this episode we will see what is Grunt, why Grunt, and Grunt implementation walkthrough in our AngularJS application that we were previously working on. So basically, what is Grunt? So Grunt is a JavaScript task runner that you can use while automating tasks in your application. For example, you are developing a web application using a JavaScript framework. Now there are n number of tasks that you need to do manually, okay, in today's date. So for example, once your development process is completed, so now you need to create a build package that you will be using to deploy in your to your application into a web server. So Grunt can automate that thing for you. Other than that, for example, you need to minify your CSS file, you need to minify your JavaScript files. So Grunt can automate that task for you. There are unit testing within your application that you need to execute before you create a build package or before you go for a release. So Grunt can automate that thing for you as well. For example, there are a couple of tasks like copying few files from one folder and paste those files into a separate folder, okay, creating your deployment package directory and structures. So all these things that Grunt can help you to automate. You do not need to do all this thing manually every time you create a build or every time you go for a release. So using Grunt Task Runner, we can save a lot of time during our deployment cycle, and it can faster our development process too. For example, you are using Grunt watch function. Okay, so now you have executed your application and your application, you can see the application output on a browser window. Now you go back to your IDE that you are working on and you do some changes, and you go back to the browser and you can see the changes automatically reflected in the browser, because Grunt watch function is monitoring your files from the background. So it will always keep on monitoring the changes that you are doing, and it will rebuild your application and you can see the changes directly in the browser. Okay, so that is how Grunt can help us to speed up our development process as well as deployment process. So the application, AngularJS application that we were working on, so there we have already seen like how Yeoman has created a gruntfile.js to speed up our development process and deployment process. So in this video we will see that particular file in more granular level, and we will see what are the components inside that file and what are the functionalities of those components. So let's begin. So this is the application that we were working on the past two episodes. So in this episode also we'll continue with this application only. So let's go back to our application root folder. So this is our application root folder. So we can see currently we have F folder, Bower components, node modules, test, and few other supportive files such as grunt file, Bower package.json, Bower.json. So in our last video we have already talked about this, what is the use of this package.json, grunt file, Bower.json, node modules folder, grunt component folder, and app folder, test folder as well. Okay, so in this episode we will take a closer look into this gruntfile.js. Okay, so in the last episode we have already seen like how this Grunt file or how Grunt is helping us to faster our development. For example, we have seen like there is a function within Grunt called watch. So what it will do, it will what it does, it keeps on monitoring your files within your application root folder. Now whenever you make any changes, and so you do not need to go back to the browser and reload the page every time. So Grunt will keep an eye on the files, and whenever you make any changes, Grunt will rebuild the application and it will reload the content in the browser. So you just, if you go to the browser, you can directly see the changes. You do not need to reload the browser all the time you make changes. Okay, so this is how Grunt is helping us while development process. Now in this episode we will see how Grunt will help us for the deployment process. So as we have already talked about, in our deployment cycle we may have n number of tasks to do. For example, minified CSS minification, JavaScript minification, HTML minification, cleaning the old files, rebuild the application, copying the new files with new changes, concatenating. Say for example, we have n number of HTMLs within our application, so concat all this HTML into a single HTML, concat all the JavaScript into a single JavaScript, concat all the CSS into a single CSS. So this way there are many tasks that we need to perform while we go for a release or a build. So we do not need to do all this thing manually, because Grunt will help us to automate all this thing. So in our last video, in our last episode, we have already seen how Yeoman is providing us this Grunt file when we are creating a scaffolding of an AngularJS application using Yeoman. So this Grunt file already contains or already handle all these things. So what you need to do, you just need to take a look, and if you want to do some modification, or if you want to add some other task that you want to automate, for example, here in this build process we do not have anything to manage the cache. For example, we are creating a build package, so this Grunt will concat all our JavaScript file into a single file. So for example, it will name it as script.js. Now we will take that build package and we'll deploy it in a web server, so our end user will start using it. For example, now after 2 days, we make some changes within our application, we redeploy the application into the web server, but as because it's a browser keep on storing this script file, CSS file into cache, so it may happen that the browser at the end user end will still refer the older version of the JavaScript file or the CSS file. It will not take the latest version from the web server. So to handle this sort of problem, we can take help from Grunt. So Grunt can automate that thing too. So what it will do, whenever we create a build package, it will concat all the script file into a single script file, and with every build it will rename that file with a version number. Say for example, script.js, and after that it will append version number with it, so that the browser at the client end, it will get to know that okay, a new version of that particular script file is available, so it will download that file from the web server. It will not use the older version of the script file that the browser has stored in its own cache. Okay, so these are the things that Grunt will help us to automate. We can see within this Grunt file.js, Grunt has created many tasks like Grunt build. You can see build is here, then test is here. So now we'll talk about it. So once your development process is done, now you need to create a build package that you will deploy to the web server. So you have a web server where you need to deploy your application. So you wouldn't like to deploy your application with such a complex structure. So you'd like to create a build package with a simpler version, with a minified version of this entire complex application, and then you would like to deploy that thing into the web server. So to do so, Grunt will help us to create a build package. So we can use this grunt build command to create a build package. Similarly, to do unit testing of our application, we can take help from this grunt test. So from our application root folder, if you open command line window and if we execute this grunt test command, so it will execute grunt space test. So it will execute the unit testing that we have written using Karma framework of AngularJS. So if we execute grunt test, so it will basically do this task one by one in a series. Okay, first it will clean the directory, and at the very end it will execute the Karma framework to execute our unit test. So on the later video we will see how to write unit testing using Karma and Jasmine framework in AngularJS. Similarly, so for now, if we execute this grunt build, it will execute this task one by one, where we have included the CSS min, HTML min, all these tasks. So this CSS min will create the minified version of the CSS, HTML min will create the minified version of the HTML files, and this concat, ng template, all this thing will concat. Say for example, we have n number of HTML files, script files and CSS file within our application. So these two tasks will concat those things into a single file. And then in the minified version, minified task like CSS minify, CSS min, HTML min, this task will minify those files. Okay. So what we will do, we will go back to our application root folder and we'll open command line window, and from there we will execute this Grunt build, and we'll see how this Grunt will create a build package for this application that we can use to deploy. So let's go back to the application root folder. So from here we'll open cmd and we'll execute grunt space build, and we'll hit the enter button. So it will take some time. So you can see it will execute the task that is included in Grunt build cycle one by one. For example, at the very beginning it cleaned up all the older files, and then it will build the application, then it will concat all the HTML file into a single HTML, concat all this CSS file into a single CSS file, concat all this script file into a single script, then it will minify those files, and then we'll do few more tasks, and at the end it will say success. It will show success message, and we will be having a new folder called dist. Okay, so this dist folder will contain the build package. So if we go back to, so by the time this Grunt build process is going on, so we can go back to our Visual Studio Code, and we can, for example, let's take this clean task and try to find this task in this file. So okay, so this is the task. This is the piece of code will execute for this task clean. Okay, so here you can see this Yeoman will represent or will hold the application root folder directory. Okay, so we are saying after that we are saying .dist. So within this clean we are asking Grunt. So you know, when we will use this code or keyword as clean, so this is a inbuilt Grunt module. So Grunt will understand, okay, the Grunt has to clean the files from the given folder. Now we need to configure the folder from where Grunt will clean or delete the files. So for that we are saying Yeoman. So Yeoman will hold the application root folder and this dist. So it will clean the older build package files from the application root folder dist folder. Okay, so if we go at the very top, so here we can see we have one app config, we have one JavaScript object called app config. So within that app config we have our app directory and the dist folder name, and we are assigning this app config object to Yeoman. Okay, so Yeoman dot app, so it means the directory, it will return the directory of app folder, and Yeoman.dist means it will return the directory of the dist folder. So let's go back to the console and see. Okay, so we can see the Grunt build process is completed. So now what we need to do, so Grunt has created a dist folder for us. So here in our application root folder we can see Grunt has added a new folder called dist, and within this dist we have our build package ready. Now have a look. It is much simpler than the complex application root folder that we had earlier. Okay, so we wouldn't like to deploy this entire complex complex application structure. Rather we will deploy this dist, the content that we have inside this dist folder. Okay, so here we can see inside images, Grunt has kept all the images that we are using. Inside scripts, Grunt has kept the script file. So you know, Grunt has concatenated all the scripts for a file that we have throughout our application, and it has created a single scripts .js file. And then in our styles folder also, you know, Grunt has concatenated all the CSS that we have throughout our application, and it has created one main.css file. Okay, and it has also concatenated all the HTML files that we have throughout our application, and it has created a single index.html file. Okay, So this is how Grunt will help us to build or create the build package that we can use in order to deploy our application to a web server. So now if someone asks us to deploy this application to a web server, so we can simply copy this content from the disk folder and we can paste them in, or we can transfer them to a web server, and from there we can host this application using IIS. Okay. Now here is one interesting thing that I'd like to mention. You can see within scripts, Grunt has created or concatenated all the script file and has created a single script file. But what is this 12F05687? So this is basically a random number that Grunt is appending with the script file, to handle that browser cache problem that we just discussed few minutes back. So if we go back to our Visual Studio Code, so we can see within build we have one function or one task called file rave. So this is again a Grunt inbuilt task that we can use to handle this cache thing. There's a browser cache problem. So while doing so, if we make any changes in any of our script file, and again if we execute this grunt build command, so again Grunt will create a different random number which will be not like this 12F05687, so it will be something else, and it will append that particular number with the scripts dot that number and then .js. So this is how we can fix that browser cache problem, and we can force the browser at the user end to download the latest file from the web server. Do not use the older version that it has stored in its own cache. So in this video we have seen how Grunt is helping us to faster our development process, as well as how Grunt is helping us to faster our deployment process, how Grunt is automating things that we need to do manually. So like I have said that Grunt is a JavaScript task runner that helps us to automate our manual efforts. So in this video we have seen that how Grunt is doing so. So that's for now. I hope you liked this video. If you find this video helpful, so please do like and share, and please leave your feedback in the comments below. Okay, and please subscribe my channel for more upcoming latest AngularJS episodes. Thank you very much for watching this video. Stay tuned.